He clocked in at 7:28, not 7:30, 7:28, 2 minutes early, every single morning, for 39 years. Nobody told him to arrive early. Nobody paid him extra for it. He just did it, because that was who he was. Because arriving at the exact time felt, to a man like your father or your grandfather, uncomfortably close to arriving late. You probably remember the boots by the back door, the ones that never quite came clean, no matter how hard he scrubbed. The smell of oil and metal that came in with him every evening and sat in the hallway like a second presence. The way he washed his hands at the kitchen sink before he sat down, always at the sink, always before he sat down, always in the same order. He was a factory worker. And when he retired, he was richer in every way that actually matters than most people sitting in glass offices today will ever manage to be. This is how he did it, and this is what we lost when we decided that factories were something Britain had grown out of. You might remember going to meet him from work once, standing at the factory gates with your mother, waiting, and then the gates opened and the men came out in a steady stream, flat caps, work coats, bags over shoulders, and somewhere in the middle of all of them was your father's face. The clock card was the size of a playing card, and it lived in a rack just inside the entrance. 1 card per man, your name on the top, every shift recorded by the machine you fed it into. The clocking in machine made a sound, a heavy, satisfying thunk that meant the time had been stamped, the day had officially begun, and you were where you were supposed to be. If you were late, it showed on the card, a different mark, something deducted, not a conversation, not a warning, just the arithmetic of it in ink. Your father was probably late twice in 40 years. Once he had a reason, the other time nobody quite remembered what it was, and he never brought it up again. That system sounds harsh now, but there was something solid about a workplace that recorded your presence and rewarded your reliability without making it complicated. Your father knew exactly where he stood every morning. 7:28, card in, thunk. The day had started, and everything that followed was in the agreement. Does anyone remember that sound? The clocking in machine at the start of a shift? Tell me in the comments, I genuinely want to know. He clocked in every morning without fail. Then he walked to the one place in that factory that every man walked to, not because they had to, but because nothing else in the building came close to what was waiting there. The works canteen smelled of gravy. Not restaurant gravy, the kind that had been cooking since 6 in the morning in large metal trays by women who knew exactly how many men were coming and exactly what they needed after 4 hours on the factory floor. Hot food every day, sixpence, meat and potato pie, liver and onions, steak pudding with mash, chips on Friday, always chips on Friday, thick and soft in the middle and slightly overdone on the outside. And every man in that canteen ate them with the appreciation of someone who had been on their feet since 7:30. The company subsidized it, because a fed worker was a productive worker, and the people running those factories understood something that modern management has largely forgotten, that if you look after the people doing the work gets done properly. Your father sat at the same table most days, same seat, same 3 or 4 men alongside him. The conversation covered everything. Football, the price of coal, what was happening at home, whether the overtime at the weekend was confirmed. No email, no group message. Just men at a table eating gravy, talking and knowing each other well enough that they could tell when something was wrong before a word had been said. That canteen table was 30 years of friendship built one meal at a time, and 6pence a day. He kept it in his inside pocket, not because anyone told him to, because that was where it belonged. Close, available, the way you keep something you might need quickly and cannot afford to be searching for. The union was not a distant organization you paid into and occasionally heard from in a letter. The union was the shop steward, a man elected from the floor itself, who worked the same machines, wore the same overalls, ate in the same canteen, and whose job was to make sure that the agreement between the men and the management was being kept. Every word of it, If your father was being asked to do something outside his agreed role, the shop steward knew before lunchtime. If a safety issue was being ignored, management had been spoken to before the end of the shift. If a man was dismissed unfairly, and in a unionized factory, dismissal was not simple. It required procedure and documentation and cause. The shop steward was there before the man had finished clearing his locker. Your father paid his union dues every week. He never complained about it, because the union had given him something no wage packet could contain: the knowledge that he was not alone, that behind him, when it mattered, stood every other man on that floor. That is a feeling the modern workplace has largely stopped providing, and the people who have never had it do not always know what they are missing. The union protected the job, but Saturday morning was when something else protected the family, and what the factory paid on a Saturday compared to a Monday would stop most workers today in their tracks. Saturday was time and a half. Sunday, if the order was large enough or the deadline tight enough, was double time. Bank holidays were double time. These were not favors from a generous employer. They were the agreed rates, negotiated by the union, written into the contract, and paid without argument, because that was the arrangement, and everyone knew it. Your mother knew exactly what Saturday overtime meant before he came home with it. She had already decided, in the quiet calculations she did, every Friday evening when the week's money was sorted on the kitchen table, where it was going: coal, Christmas club, the holiday fund in the tin on the mantelpiece that grew slowly through winter and became Skegness or Bridlington in August. Think about that for a moment. A factory worker, Saturday morning, time and a half, enough extra to matter, enough to plan around, enough to make the difference between a tight week and a comfortable one. Now think about what most people on a short-term contract earn on a Saturday morning today, the same rate as Monday, if they are called in at all. Double time on Saturday, and once a year, the factory gave something that cost your father almost nothing, and that he looked forward to from January onwards. The coach left from the factory gates at 8 in the morning, not a minibus, a proper coach, organised by the Works Social Committee, paid for partly by the company and partly by the small weekly contributions every man put into the social fund, because nobody wanted to be the one who hadn't. Blackpool usually. Your father sat near the front, the men from his department around him. The same conversations from the canteen, somehow funnier on a coach going somewhere. Men who spent their days at machines and their evenings at home, suddenly on a day out that someone else had arranged and almost entirely paid for. He was not a man who went many places. The annual holiday was the main event. The works outing was the bonus, a day that arrived fully assembled and required nothing from him except to get on the coach and be there. He got home at 9 that evening. Your mother had kept his tea warm. He sat down and told her about it for 40 minutes, the same Blackpool he had described the year before and the year before that, and she listened the way she always listened, as if it was the first time, because that was who she was. And the next morning, he was back at 7:28, card in, thunk. Did your father go on a works outing? Blackpool? Scarborough? Somewhere else entirely? Tell me below. I read every comment. The outing was the gift nobody expected, but the real picture, what he had built over nearly 40 years, when you add it all together, is the part that most people have never stopped to calculate. Let us add it up properly. Not just the wage, the whole thing. He had a job that was there every Monday morning. Not probably there. Not there unless the budget held or the client renewed. There, his name on the clock card, his place on the floor, and the union making sure neither could be taken without cause and procedure and questions being asked. He had a canteen that fed him a hot meal every day for sixpence. He had a shop steward who worked the same floor and whose entire job was to make sure your father was treated according to the agreement. He had overtime rates that made the weekend worth getting up for. He had a work social fund that gave him a day in Blackpool every year for next to nothing. He had a council house with a rent the wage could cover. He had a family doctor who came to the house when someone was ill. He had a pension that arrived without drama, without conditions, simply because he had worked, and that was the agreement. Now compare that with a middle manager today. Graduate degree, open plan office, a laptop and a lanyard, and a performance review every 6 months. No union, no canteen, no overtime rate worth mentioning. A pension they contribute to themselves, with no guarantee of what it will be worth. Job security that lasts until the next restructure, the next round of redundancies, or the next time somebody upstairs decides the department can be handled by a smaller team or a piece of software. Your father had more security than that manager, more community, more certainty, more of the things that make a working life not just bearable, but something you can build a family around. And he earned it wearing boots he had resold twice, in a building that smelled of oil and metal, clocking in at 7:28. He had more than most people realize, and what that life actually felt like from the inside, what it meant to the man living it, is something worth saying clearly before we finish. He was not rich in the way that word gets used now. He did not have investments. He did not have a second property. He did not have anything that required a financial advisor to explain. He had a clock card and a union card and a canteen table and a coach to Blackpool once a year and a Saturday morning that paid time and a half. And when he finished, when he handed in the clock card for the last time and walked out into the rest of his life, he had enough. Not almost enough. Not enough if everything went right. Enough every month. Without drama, without worrying about whether the market had done the right thing in the right years. The men who came after him worked harder in many cases. They had more qualifications. They sat in better buildings. They used better equipment. And many of them will retire with less security, less community, and less certainty about what next month looks like than your father had standing at a machine in 1965. That is not a complaint. It is just arithmetic. Your father built something solid, not glamorous, not impressive to look at from the outside, but solid. A working life with walls around it, the union, the canteen, the overtime, the outing, the pension, that kept the ordinary difficulties of ordinary life from becoming something worse. We called it the old way of doing things, and then we quietly took it apart. Tell me in the comments, did your father work in a factory? Did he clock in every morning? Did he come home with oil on his hands and put his boots by the back door? Tell me what you remember about that man and that life. Subscribe to Yesterday UK. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.